society, that is, in which we enter as a species in a common quest, in a common opportunity. And that quest, that search, is for the development of the entire society in an equal sense, and not only for a few. And then he goes on, in a higher phase of communist society, after the enslaving subordination of the individual to labor, after this has vanished, after labor has become not only a means of life, but life's fulfillment, after the productive forces have also increased with the all-round development of each individual, and all the springs of cooperative, not competitive wealth flow more abundantly, only then can the narrow horizon of bourgeois society be crossed, and society now inscribe on its banner, from each according to his ability, to each according to his needs. And that becomes the motto, the slogan for communist society, the society that Marx sees as fulfilling us. And once again, the line, from each according to his ability, to each according to his needs. The needs now become human needs, especially needs of work, that individuals all with their various abilities will build. The hallmark, then, of the communist society is social, economic, sexual equality. The substantive needs of each will be fulfilled for all, and there will be security and equity for all. The need for sex will be expressed in love, and the need for work will find fulfillment in individually meaningful labor. That is the vision. That's the promise. Now, it certainly has been derided and discredited, perhaps wholly dismissed, this vision, since the collapse of the communist states. As we've mentioned before, Marx has been widely deemed irrelevant. And the question that I want to conclude with, is it true that this irrelevance, if we associate irrelevance with Marx, is that true? An article in the British periodical, The Economist, which is a highly reputable conservative journal, wrote this about how Marx remains relevant. The article read, Plato told his pupil Aristotle that within any organization, nobody should earn more than 5 times as much as the lowliest worker. But the Economist says things do change. The chief executive of a big American firm can now expect to earn more than $1 million a year, at least 40 times as much as an ordinary production worker. Inequality in America narrowed from 1929 until 1969. But then, after 1969, it began to widen with a vengeance, so that in 1992, the top 20% of American households received 11 times as much income as the bottom 20%. The article goes on, in other industrial countries, too, the gap between rich and poor has widened over the past decade or two. In Britain, the Commission for Social Justice painted a grim picture of poverty amid wealth. If Marx's prediction of a proletariat plunged into abject misery under capitalism has so far been unfulfilled, the widening gap between haves and have-nots is causing some to think that Marx might yet be proved right on this point after all. That was The Economist writing last year, just a year ago. Still more recent studies reported this October and November in the New York Times confirm that, to quote one article, the income gap between rich and poor is wider in the United States during the last decade than in any large industrialized country. The latest study reported by the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development provides data that economists have used, such as Lester Thurow, for example. Now, Thurow wrote an article entitled, How Much Inequality Can a Democracy Take? And he argued that in the United States, the degree of economic disparity or inequality in the distribution of wealth is entirely unprecedented in our history. He warned that, in his words, if the democratic political process cannot reverse this shocking trend to inequality, democracy itself will eventually be discredited. Now, the democratic tradition in the United States has always consisted of two conceptual strands, two promises that our founding fathers, and especially Thomas Jefferson, held before us. The truly great ideas of liberty and equality. Yet democracies seem often unable to satisfy both ideals or demands. And in truth, it often happens that the democratic dilemma boils down to this: the more liberty, the less equality, and the more equality, the less liberty. That is the problem, that we cannot seem to satisfy both. Marx, with Rousseau, represents the ideal of equality and speaks to our commitment to the promise inherent in the democratic ideal that we must address if we are to be concerned not just with one strand, the strand of liberty, but with the other strand, the strand of equality. As long as the present trend towards increasing inequality lasts in America, and it is a trend that is increasing by all accounts with shocking, alarming regularity, Marx remains valid as long as this trend continues. We cannot begin to fulfill the promise of our democratic ideal without addressing what Marx and Rousseau are both talking about, and that is the reality of inequality. Finally, Marx, in speaking to the concept of power over people, gives us a concept that others had not, and that is the reality of economic power. When we look to Marx, we look to a prophet along with the ancient Hebraic prophets of Elijah and Amos and Isaiah, who try to awaken our sense of justice. But he's also a philosopher, and he's a philosopher of the economy, and he points to power in this precise manner. And so when we think of power after Marx, we may certainly disagree with Marx that economics matters as much as it does. We may agree with Marx, but above all, we cannot ignore him. And that is his greatness as a philosopher. We must not avert our eyes from this challenge.